This happened to a buddy of mine, Mark. He had a thing for old cars, the kind with character and history. And that's where this story begins, with a rusty, vintage car that became more than just a set of wheels. Mark stumbled upon an advertisement for a 1950s car, a classic beauty that had seen better days. The price was too good to pass up, and the prospect of restoring it to its former glory got his heart racing. He called up the seller, a grizzled old man named Mr. Thompson, and they set up a meeting. On the day they were supposed to meet, Mark drove out to a remote area on the outskirts of town. The road wound through thick woods, sunlight barely filtering through the trees. It felt like he was entering a different world, a place untouched by time. Finally, he reached a clearing where a dilapidated house stood, and next to it sat the old car. It was a sight to behold, faded paint, cracked leather seats, and an air of nostalgia that hung around it like a mist. Mr. Thompson greeted Mark with a toothless grin, and they struck up a conversation. The old man seemed reluctant to part with the car, telling Mark stories of the adventures it had seen in its prime. He mentioned that the car had once belonged to a famous writer who mysteriously disappeared while on a road trip. Mark was intrigued, he loved a good mystery. They haggled over the price, and eventually, Mark drove away with the car of his dreams. He spent countless hours working on it in his garage, pouring his heart and soul into the restoration. As he fixed each dent and polished every surface, he couldn't shake the feeling that the car held secrets, stories untold. One night, as he was putting the finishing touches on the car's interior, he noticed something odd. The rearview mirror seemed to reflect more than just his own reflection. He saw glimpses of faces, sad eyes, knowing smiles, fleeting images that left him feeling uneasy. Brushing it off as a trick of the light, he continued his work. But over the next few weeks, strange things started happening. Tools would go missing, only to reappear in unexpected places. He'd hear whispers in the garage, faint voices that seemed to come from nowhere. Then, one evening, as he sat in the driver's seat, admiring his handiwork, he heard a soft voice behind him. "Thank you," it said, so quietly he almost didn't catch it. Mark whipped around, heart pounding, but the garage was empty. He brushed it off as his imagination running wild. Maybe he was spending too much time alone in the garage, he thought. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this car than met the eye. One night, unable to sleep, Mark decided to do some research on the car's history. He stumbled upon an old newspaper article about the writer who had owned the car. The story was chilling. The writer had vanished without a trace, his car found abandoned on the side of a lonely road. The writer's disappearance was never solved, and the car had passed through different owners over the years. Mark's heart raced as he read the details, piecing together the pieces of the puzzle. Could it be that the car was somehow linked to the writer's fate? Determined to get to the bottom of it, Mark started asking around town, talking to people who had known the writer and those who had come into contact with the car. He uncovered stories of strange occurrences, people claiming to have seen the car parked on desolate roads at night, its headlights flickering like ghostly eyes. As he delved deeper, the whispers in his garage grew louder. He'd hear his name being called, feel a cold breath on his neck when no one was there. And then, one night, as he was sitting in the car, he felt the seat beside him sink, as if someone had just sat down. He turned slowly, heart in his throat, and there she was, a young woman with sad eyes and a wistful smile. She looked just like the blurry images he'd seen in the mirror. "You found me," she whispered, her voice carrying a mixture of relief and sorrow. Mark couldn't believe his eyes. "Who are you?" he stammered, his voice shaky. The woman's story unfolded. She had been the writer's companion, traveling with him on that fateful road trip. She spoke of a strange occurrence on a lonely stretch of road, an encounter with something otherworldly. And then, just like that, they were both gone, vanished without a trace. Mark listened in awe as she recounted her story. He realized that the car had become a vessel, a link between the worlds of the living and the dead. The woman's spirit had been trapped, bound to the car, unable to move on. With a heavy heart, Mark knew what he had to do. He began a ritual of sorts, a way to free the woman's spirit from the car's hold. It was a process of saying goodbye, of acknowledging the past and releasing the lingering energy. Finally, after weeks of effort, the whispers ceased. The garage felt empty, and Mark knew the woman's spirit had moved on. He looked at the restored car, its shiny exterior glistening under the garage lights. It felt different now, lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. From that day on, Mark would sometimes take the car out for a spin, feeling a presence beside him, not a haunting, but a comforting presence. He knew he had played a part in unraveling a mystery, in giving closure to a lost soul. Sometimes, the things we consider ordinary hold secrets that can send shivers down your spine.